Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund 2022-2023 Grant Program Informational Webinar. We're happy that you're able to make it and join us for kind of a broad discussion about our launch of our new funding for the facility and residential projects, RFP and application. We'll just wait maybe another 30 seconds or so. It looks like some folks are still jumping on the call. So we'll resume in about 30 seconds. All right, well, we'll get started. Don't want to use too much of our time and your all's day. So we just thank you again for joining. Just a few housekeeping items that we'd like to remind you of. This webinar is being recorded so we can share it on our website in the next 1 to 3 days. It'll be available at tribalsolar.org. Everyone is in listen-only mode for the webinar, although you can use the questions pane in the control panel and also the raise hand button if you'd like to type in a question. We can also unmute you, just kind of depending on how many folks are on the call. But please go ahead and use that questions pane in the control panel, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar. Just wanted to go ahead and share who are the presenters today. My name is Tungshi Claremont. I am the TSAF Managing Director. I've been with TSAF since December 2018 when we initially got the seed funding to kind of start the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund. Been through a few grant making cycles. One of them was open, the next was by invite only, or the next two were by invite only. So we're excited again to be able to open up the facility and residential grant program as an open application cycle for any and all federally recognized tribes to apply. Also, kind of new to the team, I think he's about 2 months in. My colleague, Christian Weaver, who is the TSAF program director, we're kind of tag teaming on this webinar, so I'll be doing the first half of it, and then once he jumps on, he can do the intro or his short intro to you all, so you can kind of get to know who he is. Here's the webinar overview, what we'll be covering in this hour or so. Again, we're tag teaming, so I'll be doing the first section. Christian will take the second section. He'll be detailing kind of more of the items that are listed in the RFP and in the application. And for those of you that are new or need kind of a refresher, I'll be going over grid alternatives and the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, kind of just the background and history, and then as well as just sharing some impacts to date. So again, some of our webinar goals for those that are newer or need a refresher is just provide that background and history on the TSAF, and to, of course, inform all of our prospective tribal applicants about the application process and some of the considerations for tribes. And then, of course, to answer any questions that may be outstanding that maybe we didn't get to in the RFP or on our FAQ webpage on our website. So again, just to utilize that questions pane in the panel control. So I just wanted to kind of briefly share grid alternatives as an organization. Our mission is to build community-powered solutions to advance economic and environmental justice through renewable energy. And we envision a rapid, equitable transition to a world powered by renewable energy that benefits everyone. Grid was founded during the 2001 California energy crisis by Erica Mackey and Tim Sears, who are two engineering professionals that were implementing large-scale renewable energy and energy efficiency projects for the private sector. The idea that drove them was simple. Free, clean electricity from the sun should be available to everyone. Through grid alternatives, they developed a model to make solar PV technology practical and accessible for low-income communities while providing pathways to clean energy jobs. Some of grid impacts to date is that, grid is one of the largest, or if not the largest, nonprofit solar provider. We're a leading voice in low-income solar policy and the nation's, again, largest solar installer. We serve families throughout California and Colorado and the Mid-Atlantic region. In California, we have 6 regional offices. In Colorado, we have 1 office. And then in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the DC area, we also have another office. And since California is one of the leaders in the United States for renewable energy policy and some really great statewide initiatives, it just really makes sense for us to have a large number of regional offices in that area. And, as far as our national tribal program, that began in 2010. Again, with a lot of work in California because there are 108 tribes in California. So a lot of our regional offices have been building tribal partnerships and relationships since 2010. Our tribal team is headquartered at the Colorado office, and that team consists of, I believe they're up to 9 staff now, and they do have some kind of site project folks that come on to the team once they do some travel to different tribal communities. They do have project-based installers on their team as well. But again, Grid Alternatives as a whole has been working directly with tribal partners since 2010. And that was really to help tribal communities across the United States achieve their own renewable energy goals. The approach that has been taken in partnering with tribes is to identify, develop, finance, and implement solar power projects that meet the community needs. And on every grid install, it includes hands-on training and that workforce development piece, which is important to tribes because they're the ones that are owners of the systems. They're the ones that will be kind of hands-on day in and day out, especially with that operations and maintenance of the systems. And then of course, with those systems come the energy cost reductions directly for tribal members, whether that's the tribe itself, if it's on a tribal facility type of building, or if it's a residential solar system that saves that family, cost savings over a 25-year lifespan. Some of the impacts to date, Grid has installed over 18,000 systems and a total of 78 kilowatts and a lifetime savings of $602 million. The Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, again, began or was conceptualized in 2018 after some conversations with a handful of existing tribal members, current tribal partners, and the Wells Fargo Foundation, who has been a long time funder of grid alternatives. But back in 2018, they released a commitment of $200 million to environmental sustainability. And of that, they committed around half of that to serving Indigenous communities. And so, you know, through many conversations in early 2018, when they released that announcement, followed up by a handful of tribal partners really asking Grid to advocate and, you know, ask those tough questions of the Wells Fargo Foundation. You know, how was this funding going to get out to tribes? The concept was clear in that, you know, essential, you know, grant making type of program would be beneficial not just to Wells Fargo and, you know, stewarding this funding, but also to tribes who have had, you know, relationship with grid alternatives for many, many years. And as well, you know, as for new tribes that are getting into that renewable energy space, we do get a lot of inquiries, especially our national tribal team, and I'm sure a number of our regional partners who have established relationships with tribes. They, you know, do a lot of outreach, but tribes also come to them a lot to ask about how they can begin a relationship and a partnership, so they can get into, you know, that renewable energy development and infrastructure in their tribal community. The TSAF's mission aims to catalyze the growth of solar energy and expand solar job opportunities in tribal communities across the U.S., which is Indian country. And our vision for Indian country is a transition to energy sovereignty that is educational, entrepreneurial, and completely renewable. We look at our vision, you know, that kind of guides our work too, and not that, you know, grant funding isn't, you know, beneficial to our tribal community and partners, but we're also looking to build the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund as a community. So when we say educational, entrepreneurial, and completely renewable, we're looking to those institutions located within tribal communities. So we look to the tribal colleges and universities who, you know, have a number of environmental sustainability programs that are training the next generation of renewable energy leaders. We're looking to those energy leaders already in tribal communities who are doing the groundwork and the planning and, you know, reaching out and building those partnerships within the industry. And of course, we're providing that funding for a lot of these smaller scale facility and residential projects. So as the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, really building that community around these three pillars is, you know, our priority. And we're being very intentional about it through our programming. Again, not just as grant making, but as we have a fellowship program, a year-long fellowship program that really helps the professional development and kind of networking and connections that it takes within the renewable energy industry. We're helping these, you know, individual tribal members, or not helping, but supporting and really looking for those networking connections that may not otherwise be made. But Grid Alternatives, you know, is a very large organization, and we have a lot of industry contacts. And then it's also, you know, just about connecting with one another within our own TSAF community. A lot of times, the fellows that are participating in the fellowship, they have plans and visions for their tribal community. And it's important to be able to connect just in that space, in the tribal community space. So a lot of our, programs intersect along that educational and entrepreneurial aspect. So that's what we're really looking to build, continue to build, is that, that space that connects individual tribal energy leaders with tribes that are doing the work. And so through our fellowship program, our scholarship program, and then we're offering a couple new programs within that entrepreneurial space. One is called Summer Associates, and then we're also going to be offering an internship program beginning in the fall. So again, that's the purpose of the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, is to build this community of educational, entrepreneurial, and completely renewable tribal communities. Some of the impacts to date, we're really going through our data right now, but from over the past 4 years, or since the 2018 when we initially got our funding, we have provided 4.1 million in grants to 30 different tribes, and that lifetime savings is well over 10.5 million, and we've installed we've helped support the installation of over 70 kilowatts of solar energy. So a lot of these impacts with this new funding is going to provide almost double that support. So we had a high-level funder from the Bezos Earth Fund in December of last year provide almost a $12 million grant that is going to do a lot of great, work, or we're going to be able to provide a lot of resources for this great work happening in tribal communities. So we're really looking to almost double that number in the next couple of years. And so it's with prospective applicants like you all that we're really looking forward to support in your renewable energy development and infrastructure in your community. Kind of based on the grid alternatives pillars of people, planet, and employment, some of the impacts that directly benefit or directly kind of touch within Indian country within these 3 pillars is that, a lot of these projects that the TSAF is able to fund and support is really, impacting the entire community, whether that's on a facility building that is used as a community center, kind of a gathering place for different community events. And it's also about really supporting the tribal community's energy sovereignty and resiliency planning. It really does get them on the path, or get you all on the path to that energy security. So there's a number of, grantees in the past few years that have really large, visions and goals for their tribal community along this resiliency and sovereignty and security planning. As far as, the pillar of planet, tribes are disproportionately on the front lines of climate change. It's not that tribes are able just to pick up, their communities and move to a new location. That's never going to happen because these are our tribal homelands. These are places where, our cultural lifeways depend on, whether that's, for traditional or ceremonial purposes, but it's also for, as far as the food sovereignty and, our water resources. These are important places to us. And so, having renewable energy is, it's kind of it's a preservation of those lifeways because it's a clean, renewable energy. And so that's kind of how we see the impacts as far as, that pillar of planet. And then also, as mentioned before, Many of our funded projects have included that workforce development and training piece. And we really do encourage that, as you'll see kind of in the application for funding, we ask those questions about, if you plan to include that workforce development piece, those applications tend to be a little more compelling. But if, again, that takes a lot more coordination and planning for, so we understand that. But there's also kind of consider, the operations and maintenance of the systems, because tribes will become owners or they will own this system. It's important for your tribe to, take full ownership of that and include kind of that operations and maintenance training aspect of your project. So it, however you want to approach your application, we love, seeing all these different types of ideas and visions for, a particular tribal community. But the way we also view impacts is along these pillars of people, planet, and employment. So I just encourage you all to think of those pillars and see how you can incorporate that as far as maybe some of your outcomes and potential impacts from your proposed application. Real briefly, I just wanted to share a past TSAF grantee highlight. Many of you all may be aware of the Spokane Indian Tribe and their housing authority really going aggressively toward a net zero community. So their plan for becoming a net zero community by 2030 is, it's really aggressive and proactive, and we're just real proud partner of this work. They initially received one of the first grants in 2018 because they were a recipient of a Department of Energy Indian Energy grant. So we helped provided some of that gap funding toward their project. And since then, they have installed over 600 kilowatts in their community, and they are continuing on with through their energy planning, and they're in the phase 2 of solarizing about 20 more facilities and residential projects. So they're, again, they're one of our proud partners that we like to often highlight, and someone that I think all tribes should kind of look to as something as replicable in their own community. And I just encourage you all again to look at our website. We do feature every one of our grantees that has received a TSAF grant, just kind of give an overview of what their project is or was, and yeah, we're just proud to be partners of 30 tribes in the past few years, and we're only gonna be able to reach double that in the next couple years due to our recent Bezos Earth Fund. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Christian to cover the more application and RFP process. Christian, if you can unmute yourself. You can't. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for unmuting me. Can you hear me now?
Can you speak up a little bit louder? You sound a little quiet. So.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I'm sure others can, but it's still a little quiet. So.
A little quiet. I'll speak up really loud. Thanks again for that wonderful background, Tangshi. Was always great as a refresher to get that historical knowledge of what we've gone through as GRID and now TSAF. And folks, I'm happy to share with you some really exciting things that's coming up on the horizon for TSAF, starting with our TSAF priorities for 2022-2023. As you can see, our first priority of the year is to provide necessary funding to support the development of new solar demonstration projects in tribal communities around the country. Our second being to prioritize the development of long-term energy plans to increase tribal energy security and resiliency. And the third being that we support and encourage solar education, training, and workforce development in tribal communities. That's speaking to what Tangshi just alluded to a little while ago around employment. So TSAF, in collaboration with tribes and tribal leaders, aims to address challenges and opportunities related to energy sovereignty, climate resilience, and resource sustainability. We're excited to share our mission, vision, and goals through grant making with tribal communities across the Indian country by engagement, communication, advocacy, technical assistance, collaboration, and a commitment to build capacity in tribal energy sovereignty. I want to share first and foremost about the current grant that just opened on June 1st. And if I cough a little bit, please excuse me. I just got over COVID, but it has left me with a really annoying cough. So my apologies ahead of time. We have just opened the Tribal Solar Facilities and Residential Grant that will stay open until July 15th. This tribal solar project funding is for those who are seeking funding for tribal facilities or tribal homes, which includes single-family homes and multifamily residences as well. This application allows a combination of tribal facilities and tribal homes project funding, or you may propose one type of project to be funded up to $200,000. So you can combine either a project that includes both residential facilities and community facilities, or you can ask for funding to do one or the other. And again, these projects will be funded up to $200,000. Next, on July 1st, which is just a few weeks away, we will be opening our TSAF Tribal Energy Plan Grant. Excuse me, our TSAF Tribal Energy Plan Grant. We're really excited about this. The Tribal Energy Plan Grant is for those who are just beginning their tribal renewable energy journey and need to develop an energy plan for their community. Tribal energy plans help tribal communities work towards a better environment for all community members by using a comprehensive plan of action as a guide to develop a more sustainable tribal nation. This can be a starting point for a pipeline to a greater community. As outlined in the application on this slide, gap funding is the next grant that we're going to open up on August 1st. This is an opportunity for tribes that have a larger scale project with a large funding gap to have that funding gap filled by a grant by TSAF. This funding does not require the Department of Energy application, but we will include folks that have been funded by DOE in our application reviews. These proposals will be funded up to $250,000 per project. I want to reiterate that. So if your gap is only $50,000 and not $250,000, please go ahead and apply. But the funding max for that gap is $250,000 per project. And if I failed to mention it, the Tribal Energy Plan Grant that opens on July 1st will be funded up to $25,000 per project. So if you are a tribal nation that is just getting started in your renewable energy journey and really need a plan to kind of dictate and understand what the needs of your community are, that plan grant is perfect for you. And you might want to hold off on applying on the facility and residential grants. Apply for this planning grant. build out your plan, and the next year apply for a larger facility and residential grant. So for the current grant that is open now, the timeline kind of looks like this. As you know, we're currently in the TSAF webinar, which is taking place today. The applications for this grant are due by July 15th. So you have about a month from now to complete those applications, which you'll find on tribalsolar.org. The week from August 8th through the 12th, we'll be notifying folks of whether or not they've been awarded or will not be awarded this go around. So those award letters or denial notifications will be sent out the week of August 8th through the 12th, but they should all be in your inbox by August 12th. On August 19th, we will expect the signed grant agreements due back to our offices via email for those that have been awarded a TSAF grant. And then September 1st is the grant start date. Very exciting. And these are essentially one-year grants. So these grants will run September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023. And then a month after the grant ends, in September 30th, 2023, your final report will be due. So there's a timeline here. This timeline can also be found in the RFP on our website under grants. It's outlined there for you as well, so you have a good idea of what's coming down the pipeline for this grant that will be open. And the other grants that will be open in July 1st and August 1st will also have a timeline associated with those grants as well, so you have a good idea of what's coming down the pipeline and what you need to be doing to get in order for these grants. I want to talk a little bit about the application details with you for this current grant that's open, the facilities and residential grant. We're going to cover a couple of things here. Each of these bullet points on the slide, the criteria, eligibility, submission guidelines, proposal review, required attachments, excuse me, are all also found in the RFP. So please take some time in your own time to familiarize yourself with the application criteria, eligibility, and submission guidelines. But I'm going to talk a little bit about it right now, just so that we can familiarize yourself with it, and there might prompt some questions for later on in this webinar. A couple of things to note is the first thing is the selection criteria. So we're looking for a couple of things: a solid and concrete match between the project purpose and funding priority area. We're looking for a clear focus on building renewable energy infrastructure in your tribal community. We're looking for a demonstrated ability and or experience necessary for a completed project. So let us know if you've done a project of this scale in the past. Hopefully you were successful in that, and you can demonstrate that your ability to carry out such a project. That leads us to like a clear plan of action, including specific goals and measurable objectives. Let us know how you're going to carry out this project. What are your goals? What do you hope to achieve? And what's going to be entailed for you to carry out this project to fruition? Hopefully you'll have a feasibility. Hopefully the project is feasible, cost effective, and you'll have a sustainable budget. Also, if you have partnerships that engage a broader tribal community, that also is very appealing to us as we're reviewing the applications. If you have potential for your application and replication in other tribal communities, so if your project can be replicated in other tribal communities, that's also very interesting to us. We love the ability to share best practices with tribal nations across the country. That enables renewable energy to spread in a good way, and for other tribal nations to look at the wonderful project that you're doing, and hopefully to emulate those in a good way, so that renewable energy becomes the norm among tribal communities. Next, I want to share a little bit about eligibility. So we're committed to serving, supporting, and strengthening American Indian and Alaska Native communities by investing in solar. Currently, our grants, our facilities and residential grant is open to federally recognized tribal governments in the lower 48 states and Alaska. So again, this grant is currently open to federally recognized tribes in the lower 48 states and Alaska, as well as tribally run nonprofits, so 501c3s may also submit an application on behalf of a tribal government to do the work in the community. Schools that are also tribally 501c3 controlled can also apply for the like a TCU or another institution that is a 501c3 and tribally controlled can also apply for the funding. The definition of a tribally led organization is an organization which the majority, so over 51% of the board of directors and leadership team are American Indian or Alaska Native. Organizations that are not tribally led are not eligible to apply for this grant. Tribal facility projects, for tribal facility projects, the community served must be designated, excuse me, designated to a moderate or low income demographic, which is demonstrated by eligibility for federal, state, or tribal low income programs or with census data. For tribal household or multifamily projects, the resident household must be 80% at 80% or below the area median income as defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD, or other low income serving programs. Then I'd like to now talk about submission guidelines, proposal review, scoring, and then also some of the other attachments that we have located in the RFP. So the TSAF application must conform to the following requirements. You must secure a tribal resolution or letter of support from your tribe, council, or board of directors acknowledging the application for the proposed project. We do this because we want to ensure that the tribe is aware of the project that's going to happen. So this is especially important for tribally led nonprofits. If you're applying for this application, we want to see a resolution from the tribal nation or a letter of support letting us know that the tribe supports this and is behind these efforts. The application must be accompanied by a budget narrative, a project timeline, and of course, as I mentioned, the resolution. The budget narrative and the project timeline are templates that you'll find in the application. We've built those in there so you have a good idea of what we're looking for in those sections. Now, if you look at the if you're looking at the budget template, we've outlined some line items for you to help you identify what your needs are for the budget. Things like supplies, equipment, in-kind, personnel, travel. We also have a line item that says contingency funds. That is indirect funding. So we allow indirect funding up to 10%. Now, if for some reason your project has line items that you don't see in this template, please feel free to edit as needed and to adapt the template to fit your budget narrative. We've also included a project timeline template that will allow you to have a better idea of how to build out your project timeline. The templates are downloadable on the website, not the application. My apologies about that. Thank you, Tangshi, for that clarification. right. As always, TSAF is committed to a really great experience when applying. We want to take into consideration the sovereignty of tribal governments, and also that Indian country is unique. And so we've taken a lot of time in developing our application that is thorough, but also not impossible. I'm sure a lot of you folks have applied for funding in the past, and a lot of times funding applications don't really align with the way that we do business in Indian country. So we've taken a lot of thought into the way that our application is written and what we're asking you folks to share with us. And hopefully, as you're building out this application, you're able to take those beautiful nuances in your community and share with us, what makes your community special, what makes your project special, and hopefully this application process is seamless and works well for you. Now that I've covered the application details, I will now provide some high-level information once your project is excuse me, awarded. As you may recall from an earlier slide, award and denial notifications will be made by August 12th via email. Grant agreements will need to be signed by an authorized tribal official or an executive director no later than August 19th. The grant agreement will contain common grant agreement terms and conditions such as the purpose of the grant amount, performance monitoring and reporting, and the communication plan. The grant agreement may allow for TSAF and grantee to negotiate certain terms on a case-by-case basis. The project construction will vary depending on your plan to use grid alternatives as your installer or local installer, which will be outlined in the grant agreement. I will schedule quarterly check-ins with your project lead and communication contact during the first week of September, January, April, and July. We use Skype or Zoom, but are open to other platforms if preferred. These check-in calls are really, really great because it enables us to get to know your communities better. We are thoroughly invested in the positive impact of these grants in your community, right? So, and we're invested in Indian country as a whole. So we really want to get to know you as a tribal community, get to know your project, understand the needs of your community, and also support you along this journey. So these check-in calls are really essentially for us to get to know each other very well, to be thoughtful and impactful partners. This is a partnership, and we look at it as definitely a partnership, and we want to, as the year goes along, grow together, learn together, and be better acquainted in that space. At the end, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, at the end of your grant period, we are going to ask for a report to TSAF. As I mentioned, the grant year is from September 1st to August 31st. And you may have noticed that final reports are due to the TSAF by September 30th. Although your grant may not be spent down or the project may be unfinished, we still ask that you report on planned activities or spending through August 31st. The grant agreement covers a couple of different things. I'll go through a little bit about what the grant agreement includes. It includes outlining how the financial support in your grantee project is built out. It includes payments. It includes the expenditure of funds, expenses timing, and record keeping. It includes how we're going to communicate to the general public about your project. It includes intellectual property ownership. It includes publicity about your project, what we expect and what you can expect from GRID around us acknowledging and celebrating your fantastic project. It includes a section on compliance around what we expect from you to from a compliance standpoint as the year goes by. It includes things like approval of logo use, intellectual property ownership, and trademarking and things of that nature. It also includes information about the grantee report, what should be included in it, when it's due, and then also representations and compliance, authority, conflicts, claims, things of that nature. And then finally, it looks at additional obligations of the grantee, prohibited use of funds, administration of the grantee projects and indemnification, and then terms and termination of the project. So those that are awarded a grant will receive this grant agreement. Please go through it thoroughly and have it signed by the executor of the project. I want to share a little bit about ineligible TSAF projects. So there's some things that are not eligible to be funded by TSAF and by this grant. Casinos and or casino property is not an allowable project. Rental property, unless all the tenants are income qualified and will directly benefit from the renewable energy system. Projects that do not benefit low or moderate income tribal members are not eligible for this project. TSAF funding may not be used for program costs that are not associated with a specific project, staff incentives such as gift cards or personal items. So keep that in mind as you're developing your application and your budget. There are some really great things that are eligible for this funding. Highly competitive applications include a variety of renewable energy technologies, such as EV, wind, and things of that nature. So if your project incorporates a diverse portfolio of renewable energy technologies, that makes your application a little bit more interesting. And we love looking at that. So, please feel free to be creative. I know that mobility is a hot topic now, and we're loving seeing all the tribes start to dive into mobility and other renewable energy infrastructures. Projects can include rooftop, carport, or ground-mounted solar solar installations that meet the energy needs of the tribal community. Other allowable project costs include supplies, solar equipment and construction materials, in-kind personnel, salary and fringe, contractual costs, and project contingency funds. Next, I want to go over some frequently asked questions. So these are some things that come up all the time that folks wonder about. Excuse me. The first question is, can TSAF be used on off-grid and grid-type projects? Yes, absolutely. TSAF understands the varying needs in tribal communities, especially those in isolated and remote areas that rely on off-grid systems. So go for it. Is storage or EV chargers allowable projects? Yes, absolutely. TSAF is open to supporting storage and EV charger projects, but they must be connected to a solar component. What are technical assistance resources, and when they will be available to the grantees? If and when Grid is the installer for a project, TA will be provided through the process. For non-grid alternative installed projects, technical assistance will be limited. We can provide more information about that as the process goes on. So just to reiterate, Grid, you do not need to use Grid as an installer for your project. You can if you would like. You can request that, but this grant is not contingent upon you using us as an installer. You can choose whatever installer that you would like for your project. want to make sure that's clear for folks. And that is the end of our presentation, our webinar. Again, our website, if you've not visited it yet, is tribalsolar.org. You can find the applications, the RFP there, and also other great information about the work that we've done in the past, previous grantees, and other applicable information for these grants. Tanshi, do we want to open it up for questions, or what would we like to do now?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that overview, Christian. You will find for more FAQ questions on our website. That was just kind of a sample of the top questions that we usually get. So for more FAQs, please go to the website. There's a dedicated page for that. I am looking at the questions pane right now. Let's see. Can a tribe seek funding under the presently available TSAF grant and use the funding for gap filling if it applies for and receives DOE grant under the round of DOE grant applications that are to be made available this summer? Yes. So usually we try to align our grant funding applications with, other federal grant funding, but we weren't really sure when DOE was going to release until just a few weeks ago, and that was it kind of came after we already planned our launch dates. But yeah, we in the past there's been a handful of DOE grantees that received that gap funding from the TSAF, and that was prior to them even receiving the award from the DOE. We just, either way, a few of these grantees, their projects were going to be completed, in a reasonable time frame anyway. But it did help them to receive a TSAF grant in their application with the DOE application, because we did provide kind of that letter of support saying, we're providing this much funding toward this proposed DOE application. So we definitely encourage that. And for folks that may have received a recent DOE award, we also encourage you to apply for that gap funding. Sometimes, you may not have the full match for your DOE grant, or, if you do apply for a gap funding grant through TSAF, that will save your tribe, the resources as well. So yes and yes. If you are looking to apply for DOE, please apply for our grant funding match program. And if you've already received a DOE grant, and we can save your tribe those resources and other funding, it's a win-win, I think, for either scenario. I do not see any other questions right now. But we're definitely available for, again, at grants@tribalsolar.org. That contacts Christian directly. For those of you that may have already received a TSAF award in the past, my contact information hasn't changed, so it's tclaremont@gridalternatives.org. So either way, you choose to reach out to us, we'll definitely be looking for those inquiries as we get closer to that July 15th due date. If there's no other questions, we're just happy that you were able to attend, and we look forward to your application. So if that's all for today, again, we'll be signing off, and a recording of this webinar will be made available on the website. Please review the RFP. There's a link that will take you to an intake form that will then give you access to the application online. So if you have any questions with that, or if you're having any trouble with that, please let us know. Sometimes our emails filter out these auto-generated replies. So go ahead and contact us and we'll get you that link to the application. In that application, there's also, you can save it as a draft and come back to it later. But if you face any challenges with that, again, feel free to reach out to us and we'll do what we can to provide some of that troubleshooting for those issues. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and we'll be connecting with each and every one of you soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.